I find the whole thing distasteful. It's a mafia racket in a lot of ways. Zelensky's having to pay us for security. It's like it's a shakedown, I think.
Let's discuss, shall we, Michael Binion and Zoe Strimple. Michael, first of all, a minerals deal that is in part about paying back the United States for some of the aid that they've provided to Ukraine. But as I understand it, it will in part also be kind of a future down payment for some US involvement in Ukraine if a peace deal is negotiated. That is what has been talked up. There's no security guarantees in the draft that's been seen by a couple of sources. But it is not just about repaying the United States. It's also to act as a down payment as well.
Yes, and that seems rather odd. I mean, it's a rather mercenary approach to security, isn't it? We'll guarantee security, we'll keep peace in the world as long as you pay us enough to do it. I mean, that's what mercenary armies used to do. And the idea of linking security to we need this and we need that for us alone, the United States will have a sort of monopoly. You may think that Ukraine will need all the money they can get from exports of these rare earth materials, to rebuild their country if and when we get some kind of peace deal. But that seems to be the case, that's what Donald Trump is now looking for. And it's just another indication of his shock and awe tactics. I mean, he put out a whole series of absolutely unbelievable demands and extraordinary statements about 3 weeks ago. And the after effect of that is quietly rolling in, just to his satisfaction. I mean, as we are now about to see, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is going to Washington with, under his belt, the promise of an increase in defence spending. That was one of the key things that Trump said that he wanted to see from all his allies, and he more or less said, if you don't do that, frankly, we're going to abandon you in NATO. So all this sort of tough talk, it does seem to have produced results.
I mean, Zoe, Donald Trump likes a deal, the art of a deal. This seems to be, I mean, we don't know all the detail yet, but when I first heard, in fact, I saw a draft of this deal not a couple of weeks ago. Well, yeah, maybe a week or so ago. And my sort of first initial thought was, I mean, yes, I suppose if the US are wielding a lot of power over Ukraine, if they've paid the lion's share of military aid and support, according to them. By the way, those figures don't always stack up when you add everything in that European countries have given. But anyway, that this is a genius move by Donald Trump. If you're talking about a business deal, this is a good deal potentially for the United States.
There's some interesting cleverness to this deal because it is kind of managing to find a way to bake in U.S. financial support for Ukraine, potentially its defense, but in a way that serves the U.S. as well, which takes care of this kind of this growing isolationism among Trump's supporters. The idea that which is growing around populist parties around Europe as well, and here as well, that we shouldn't just be forking out all this money for countries that are thousands of miles away. So that kind of takes care of that in quite a clever way. But I think what Michael says is right, which is that is it actually reassuring to think of a kind of mercenary new era of defense? You could argue maybe that it's always been somewhat behind the scenes like that, a quid pro quo. But this does seem especially kind of in your face. We'll pay to keep you from being taken over by this kind of rogue dictator if we can lay claim to all of your minerals that you might need in future. So yeah, that's a little bit sinister. And also, I think the flip side to that is if that's the position being taken, what does that mean when an enemy like Russia, or not that the U.S. appears to be considering Russia an enemy now, but or any other enemy that may arise, or China or whatever, suddenly has a mineral deposit or something that the U.S. wants? Does that then mean all bets are off? Of course, there's never going to be any kind of war. Everything has to come down to tradable kind of commodities. I think that is actually a really dangerous new era, because I think what we see over and over again is that these things do come unstuck. And that, I think, is something that Keir Starmer miraculously has finally understood.
Well, of course, this reads across immediately to the Taiwan situation, because Taiwan makes the bulk of the world's chips that the world wants, and America desperately needs them. And
Computer chips. Not,
yes, computer chips.
Not
Yes,
potato
no,
chips.
not fry.
Sorry.
It makes a few of those, but no, computer chips, the absolute core of most modern technology. And the Americans have been pushing to have a greater share of that market. And they're more or less suggesting that if, they can get their hands on some of these vital computer chips, then they'll be more willing to defend Taiwan against China.
Well, yeah. Do they want the computer chips, or do they want the potential revenue from the resources? Where are they going to take the resources? Are they going to export the resources? Are they just going to lay claim to any profit that those resources
that's not quite clear yet, but certainly Trump sees that this all this huge expense that America is forking out for buying these things is part of his idea that other countries are taking advantage of America.
Yeah. One thing that this does do, of course, is it puts US interest in Ukrainian assets. In other words, in Ukrainian areas, lands, territory. So, is that a security guarantee enough?
Well, in a way, it is, yes.
In itself,
yes.
because Russia are less likely to reinvade if we reach a peace deal, that they're less likely to do that if they know that the US has interest in Ukrainian territory.
Yes, I think that is some sort of deal, because it's obviously in America's interest to defend what they've now got or are about to get.
Yeah, ownership. The EU apparently offered its own win-win minerals deal with Ukraine, because you might say, well, hang on a minute, European countries have given a hell of a lot of money to President Zelensky. What about us in this deal making? Why does the US get to walk off with lots of cash? But Europe's Commissioner for Industrial Strategy, Stefan Sejourné, said that he'd pitched a rival proposal to Ukrainian officials that he met in Kyiv during a visit this week. This is the European Union's own agreement on critical minerals. I don't know where this stands after the apparent signing of Donald Trump and President Zelensky on their deal. Zelensky saying, by the way, at a press conference on Sunday, I will not sign what 10 generations of Ukrainians will have to pay back. That was one of his lines in the sand. So it'll be interesting to see what the final text looks like on this. Let's go to Keir Starmer, Zoe Strimple, and his increase of defence spending from 2.3 to 2.5% by 2027. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm impressed. I mean, to me, this is the first good decision that Keir Starmer has made. I mean, he seems to have understood with some moral clarity. He's gone big. He has allowed, there's real politic here. Trump is basically forcing this. Another thing, I mean, I'm very loath to kind of give Trump straight-faced credit, but I mean, he is a lot is happening by way of a kind of ripple effect. And I just think the way, he seems to have understood that if we don't have a Britain that's capable of defending itself against quite clear threats on many fronts and in many, from cyber, from, actual potential military offense, from Russia, then the NHS won't be relevant if Russia kind of continues unabashed through Europe or whatever. So I think he's in a way, he's spelling out quite an extreme vision, which is that this is something that is worth taking from another pot, i.e. foreign aid, because we won't have a society to defend, quite possibly, if we don't sort out defense spending. And we haven't seen that level of moral clarity, or not even moral clarity, geopolitical clarity around defense in decades. So I think it's obviously what had to happen. But I think it's impressive. I'm glad I'm seeing it come from Starmer. I was not 100% sure he would have the kind of clarity to go for that.
A thumbs up from Zoe Strimple. We spoke to James Cartledge, the Shadow Defence Secretary, earlier, who told me that he gave his support to the Prime Minister's decision, but said that Starmer did need to do more.
I think that in the current climate, where we face profound threats to our country, and where the public finances are tight, it's not unreasonable to increase defence spending and use some of the aid budget. If your main threat is from these peer military countries, Russia, China, and so on, and particularly in our case, Russia, then the only thing we can invest in that will boost our deterrence, in my view, is defence. And so I do support what they've done today. And indeed, at the weekend, I called for higher defence spending, funded in part by the aid budget.
Michael Binion.
Yes, well, of course, everyone regrets the drop in aid budget, and it comes particularly at a hard time for those in desperate need, because the Americans have also cut their foreign aid, and quite drastically, and a whole lot of very important projects, vaccinations across the world, polio inoculations, things of that kind, they will suffer. And those countries that have been trying to do the right thing with foreign aid will find suddenly they're only halfway there and it will dry up. But needs must. And the fact is that if they'd tried to find this money from the health service or from education or whatever, there would have been an absolute outcry. And that has been the difficulty for Starmer all along. He would like to have done this.
Well, those are protected budgets as well.
They are.
So they would have had an issue, wouldn't they?
You would. I mean, protected up to what point? If we're talking about the verge of war, which luckily we're not on, then almost everything
maybe there's a
is
concession
up for
to be
grabs.
made.
But, I mean, it is the right thing to do, and it's regrettable, and Starmer himself regretted cutting the aid budget, but it had to happen.
Let's get more reaction to that breaking news this hour, that the US and Ukraine have reportedly reached a deal that's related to critical minerals. The White House is yet to confirm that an agreement has been reached. It's also being reported that Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, will visit Washington on Friday. Jim Townsend is former Deputy Secretary for Defence for Europe and NATO under Barack Obama and Joe Biden and joins us. Jim, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well. What do you make of this mineral deal? It appears it has been struck with the United States and Ukraine. It doesn't, as far as we understand, it doesn't contain a specific security guarantee in it for Ukraine, which was something that they talked a lot about. It no longer contains the initial demand by the United States for a right to $500 billion worth in potential revenue from resources. That is no longer in it. What do you make of this? What do you think should be in it? What could be in it?
Well, I mean, all those are great questions. I can't wait to read it. I find the whole thing distasteful. It's a mafia racket in a lot of ways. Zelensky's having to pay us for security. It's a shakedown, I think. I don't see how we as Americans can feel proud of this, that we're giving Zelensky security or security guarantee or helping him deal with the Russians. It's all, checking a box for Trump, where he feels that we need to get something for our money, that we've provided assistance for a number of years, and he's trying to get something for it, which is not why we provided assistance. This isn't some transaction, but that's what it's turned into. And I just don't understand, frankly, if this is minerals paying a bill that is due from the past couple of years, or if this is paying for security that will come in the next couple of years.
So look, here is a bit of detail I've got. The two sides have apparently agreed on a framework agreement on how to create a fund that will be filled with a share of minerals and other natural resources. This is a political step to ensure that resource revenues are used for the security and reconstruction of Ukraine. So the fund would comprise American money that would be invested in Ukrainian natural resources, with profits shared between Washington and Kyiv. That is the understanding from sources in the Ukrainian government so far. So this is essentially the US putting money into a fund to help grow these resources, to help maximise them, guaranteeing the security and reconstruction of Ukraine when that money is then taken out of the fund. So suddenly that doesn't look so bad, does it?
Well, I guess in some ways it doesn't sound so bad.
Because they're kind of investing in this fund, which isn't going to pay back, and it will go back towards rebuilding, parts of Ukraine.
I guess, and they say this is an inherent security guarantee, that because we have this deal on this fund, while it's not an actual security guarantee with troops and this type of thing, there's an inherent security aspect of this, because why would Russia attack something that where the U.S. has these interests and would be upset if they attacked, I guess. but I still find it distasteful. I don't know. I guess I understand why we want to make sure that we're just not giving money hand over fist everywhere. I mean, and we want to see something for it. But this situation, the reconstruction of Ukraine, that belongs to everybody, all Europe, U.S. And we want money from Russia for that too. So we kind of taking this off the Russian table in terms of them having a role to play in reconstruction, and we're going to pick it up through this investment thing, or what? It just doesn't make me feel real good about this. I guess I need to know more. But how does it fit into any security discussion or ceasefire discussion? Or this will certainly drive us towards a ceasefire. If there's going to be exploitation of minerals and this fund, is that a sweetener for Zelensky to make a deal with the Russians so that he can have this fund? This could be the most clever thing we've ever done. I guess, but it just doesn't feel that way. And I don't see what the Russians think about it either. I mean,
a couple of things to note. We haven't had official confirmation from the White House, but Donald Trump is currently in the Oval Office signing executive orders, and he has said we've pretty much negotiated our deal on rare earths. So that is as much confirmation as we've got. We've pretty much negotiated our deal, he says.
But is this really a negotiation with Zelensky, or does he have a gun to his head?
Well, the other thing to note, sorry to interrupt, Jim.
No.
Is it part of the US providing so much military aid through NATO for Ukraine was that some of it would be paid back. And that is the case for members of the European Union and presumably for Britain as well. So, somewhere along the negotiations, I suppose, now Donald Trump's putting this at the forefront, when are we going to get our money back? And yes, we'll give you some guarantees, but we want some future investment in your country instead, President Zelensky. I'm role-playing this live on the air now. But the US certainly isn't the only country who needs to be paid back, and there will be agreements. Maybe there'll be another rare earth deal, minerals deal between EU countries and the president of Ukraine as well. So this isn't kind of something for which the US is an outlier. I mean, I think the EU's probably been a bit naive and being slow to the table on this. Who knows? They say that they've presented their own rival offer to Ukraine on minerals. But
my goodness.
I've not heard much about that in the last 24 hours or so. So who knows? Jim, we're going to have to leave it there for time, but thank you for being with us. Much appreciated. Jim Townsend, former Deputy Secretary for Defence for Europe and NATO. Thanks for being with us.